Wow, that certainly gave a lot of Star Wars fans plenty to talk about and chew over, but did it all work? Was it all successful? Was it really all worth it? And what does it mean going forward for the future? Let's find out in this review. Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and we're now going to talk about The Mandalorian and give a review of the Season 2 finale episode titled The Rescue. Now there will be spoilers within this review, so you have been warned, so I'd highly advise you now, if you haven't seen the episode yet, to go away, watch the episode and then come back within this review. And I would also advise that given this particular episode, there is so much to talk about, so much that happened, so if you haven't seen it yet, you probably want to stay off social media until you do watch it, because there will be a lot of fans talking about what went on with this episode. So you have been warned. So in terms of the story, we pick up after last week's episode titled The Believer, where we saw Mando on a chase for Baby Yoda, who had been apprehended by Moff Gideon. I'm going to call him Baby Yoda because I just prefer that name to Grigil. I know now he's got a different name, but I will still go by Baby Yoda. But that's essentially where we left off from that previous episode. So we picked up from those events and we carry on with the ongoing pursuit now, where we see Boba Fett joined with the likes of Cara Dune alongside Mando, and we get a very tense standoff where we see one of the technicians that they are chasing after, who they assume knows the whereabouts of Baby Yoda, and they take out all of the various soldiers within the ship, and one of the soldiers holds him at gunpoint and he starts taunting Cara Dune about the fact that he was on the Death Star and he saw the destruction of her planet and with her loved ones, and he kept taunting her, and Cara Dune was trying to get him to put his gun down. He wouldn't, so in the end she brutally takes him out. And again, this is a very tense filled moment. She walks away and Mandalorian gives her that cursory glance. He didn't really approve of her doing that. I think this is small little hints as what we assume we will see going forward for the Rangers of the New Republic show that they announced on the Disney Plus, where we presume that Cara Dune will be the lead character, or at the very least we will get much more of her backstory within that show, but that's a discussion for another day. So we move forward and we see that Mando and Boba Fett have met up again with Bo-Katan, hoping to enlist her help in the rescuing of Baby Yoda. Now Bo-Katan wants to do this because, as we all know, she's chasing Moff Gideon because she wants to get her hands back on the Darksaber weapon. So she has a strong motivation to help Mandalorian. We also get a fun little fight between Boba Fett and the Sasha Banks character that we saw way back in episode 3. This is a very good back and forth together, very good skills overall. It ends up in a stalemate where they shoot the flamethrowers at each other. Bo-Katan breaks them up and she agrees to help Mandalorian on the agreement that if they succeed, that she gets the ship to help her in her ongoing crusade against the Empire. And also she wants Mandalorian to consider joining them in their quest as well. So after that scene, it really is full on in terms of action and the pace and intensity. They really put the pedal to the metal here, and we get full maximum set pieces as the group of Mando and his team go all out assault in the pursuit of Moff Gideon. And we get great action, space battles, and we get the familiar sounds typical of the franchise so much. And yes, it did bring it back to that familiar territory, to what we see from the original trilogy. And all of this was great set pieces, great action, which has really been, I think, a key feature of this season. If you want to compare it to the first season, is that the action and special effects have really gone on to another level. And this passage of play really was very similar to what we saw in the third episode titled The High-Risk, where we met up with Bo-Katan to begin with. Great action, great sequences, great shootouts, and the group really were taking out all of the stormtroopers. And I did question this a bit because I felt it was coming across as too easy, because if you remember, there was only around 6 of them and there must have been hundreds within the ship led by Moff Gideon, right? So their plan, there wasn't really much of a strategical initiative. They basically just crash land into one of the cargo bays and they come out all shooting. Now, it was great and thrilling to watch, but I just think you would have liked them to have a bit more of a thoughtful strategy to infiltrate the ship and then try and rescue Baby Yoda more secretively, and then maybe get caught and then have to fight their way through. I think that would have been a much better setup of the narrative that we got on it. But still, it was great action, thrilling set pieces throughout, and it's very prolonged, I would say, for this episode, but still very exciting to watch. Mando then encounters Moff Gideon, who holds Baby Yoda at hostage with the Darksaber, and then we get a bit of dialogue between the two where Moff Gideon basically reveals that he was using Baby Yoda to extract the blood sample. We knew this already, and we didn't get much more enlightenment in terms of what they were trying to do, and I think maybe that was a flaw perhaps of this episode and perhaps of the whole season, that we didn't really get much more depth into the bigger picture that they've been really hinting at throughout this whole season. Moff Gideon also relates to the true intentions of Bo-Katan, hinting that she's not really interested as such in saving Baby Yoda, it's that she really just wants to get her hand on Darksaber so that she can lay further claim to Mandalore. After a short back and forth between the two, Moff Gideon appears to surrender to Baby Yoda on the agreement that Mandalorian takes Baby Yoda and then escapes with the ship. Now, of course, we all know this wasn't the case, and very predictably, when Mando turns his back, Moff Gideon strikes him down. We get a good fight sequence between the two, lots of great strikes. As we all know, the Beskar armor is able to withhold lightsabers. We saw that in the 5th episode of the Jedi, where the one with Ahsoka, and the Beskar steel withholds most of the strikes from the Darksaber. While it's a good fight sequence, I just feel Moff Gideon was defeated too easily. You know, we've built up Moff Gideon as being this big villain, the big antagonist, potentially for the whole series, let alone just this season, ever since we saw him emerge with the Darksaber in the season 1 finale. But this fight here, he was just defeated too easily, and at this point I just felt the episode was really kind of sort of changing. As I mentioned before, the way that the team, the small handful of them, go in there and take out all the stormtroopers, nobody really gets hurt or wounded. And again, in this fight sequence here, Mandalorian, who, remember, yes, he's a skilled fighter, but you'd like to assume that Moff Gideon, being able to wield the Darksaber, should be really a more skilled fighter than what Mandalorian. Yet Mandalorian defeats him handily. He brings him forward to the bridge. Everybody else is there congregating together. He goes to hand over the Darksaber to Bo-Katan, but then Moff Gideon interrupts and he states that the only way that you can truly take over the Darksaber and the rule of Mandalorian is through combat. No one can simply pass it over to you. It's that legacy of tradition of the Mandalore. And again, if you watch your Clone Wars, you know that this is the case. Particularly, I believe, in season 4, we saw this when this is how Darth Maul apprehended the rule over Mandalore. You have to do it through combat. It can't just be cheaply passed over. So we had a potentially interesting scenario where would Bo-Katan necessarily have to fight Mandalorian in order to take over the Darksaber? Now, Mandalorian just gives it to her, and to be honest, if we think about this development, it really didn't matter, because at this point you've defeated Moff Gideon, you've got the Darksaber back. Doesn't really matter how you apprehend it. There wasn't really other Mandalorian people around, and for any people that was, they were supportive of Bo-Katan, so whether she apprehended it through combat or not, it didn't really matter. But we didn't really have much time to ponder over this development, because all of a sudden we get the sight of a Sol X-Wing approaching the ship, and as that develops, we then see a whole horde of the Dark Stormtroopers, these big bulky, the new super soldier versions of the Stormtroopers that we saw being developed throughout the season, and they were grouping together and they were threatening to batter down the doors for which the team were trapped in. So there was a good sense of build up and tension as they were battering down the doors, and then all of a sudden they stop. and they turn around, and then we look at the security camera, and then we see a Jedi wielding a lightsaber. Now, initially, I thought it was Ahsoka, because when you look at the footage, of course, it looks like it's a white lightsaber, which we all know that Ahsoka had in the earlier episode. So we see the Jedi mowing it down, and then all of a sudden, you notice A, that it's only one lightsaber, so it can't be Ahsoka, and then B, it's in a black cloak, and then C, it turns out to be a green lightsaber. Now, for me, and just like everybody else watching this episode, all of a sudden the excitement and hype levels were driving through the roof, because we all thought, well, this has to be Luke Skywalker, right? Because as we all know, the Jedi were really dispersed at this point. Who else could it have been? So it had to be Luke, right? He had the music playing, and he was taking out all of the stormtroopers fairly with ease. It was very reminiscent of the Rogue One scene where we saw Darth Vader going through and mowing everybody down in the corridors. So for a long time, this was quite a prolonged sequence where we see him coming through. It wasn't confirmed it was Luke yet. So when I was watching this, I thought for one point, would they really do it? Would they really bring Luke back to the storyline? And then for a short while, I thought maybe it's not Luke. Maybe it's Urza. If you remember from Rebels, Urza was another individual who had the Force and was training as to be a Jedi. And as we all know, the Mandalorian is taking place a certain amount of years after Rebels. We all assumed that this is one of the reasons why Ahsoka had been brought back into the fold, because she was searching for Urza, who presumably had been apprehended by General Thrawn. We thought this is the whole reason why Ahsoka has come back into play. So as the sequence was carrying on, I kept dismissing it now, and I felt it's not going to be Luke, it's going to be Urza in the reveal. But that's not the case. The Jedi comes through the doors, and then we get the music playing. He lifts off the cloak, and yes, indeed, it turns out to be Luke Skywalker. And not only that, it was the CGI version of Mark Hamill from Return of the Jedi. Now, I've got to say, in still motion, it looked fine. But once he started talking, it did look awkward. I think there's no getting away from it. Now, I know, of course, a lot of Star Wars fans, they were probably too hyped up to care how wonky the CGI looked. They were just dazzled and thrilled the fact that it was actually Luke Skywalker in front of our screens once again. But yeah, the CGI did not look good. It was very similar to what we saw, if you remember, in Tron Legacy way back, where they did the CGI de-aging of Jeff Bridges' character, and it was fine in still motion, but once the lips start moving and the facial movements are there, it just doesn't flow right. It doesn't flow very smoothly. And we had similar issues in Rogue One, of course, where we did the same effect with Princess Leia and General Tarkin. And I think in this never-ending quest to perfect this idea of being able to digitally recreate classic characters and classic actors, it just shows we've got a bit of way to go. And to be honest, the people who have, if not perfected it, but have showcased it the best, are still the Marvel movies. If you go through various of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we get those earlier scenes where we see these classical actors de-aged, and I think so far Marvel Studios has done the best effect of this de-aging effect, and Star Wars, if it's going to continue with this, has got some way to go. So once we essentially calm down from this moment, it then gets established that Luke is the one, or was the Jedi that was destined, it seemed, to reunite with Baby Yoda. And he states that Baby Yoda has to go away and harness his Force skills. Baby Yoda, of course, is reluctant to go because he's got that bond and that connection with Mandalorian, which you've established all throughout the series. And admittedly, it's a very touching scene where we get them together and Mando takes his helmet off and Baby Yoda touches his face. It is a very touching scene, and that's one very positive aspect of the show, is that they have managed to legitimately build a very strong relationship between these two characters. As we all know, that is the overall dynamic of the show, Mando and Baby Yoda going on their various adventures. And I think it is a testament there that this moment, it did have a certain dramatic and emotional weight. and it was good acting from Pedro Pascal. This is of course the second and only time that he's taken off his helmet. We got it of course in the previous episode, The Believer, and yeah, it's a moment that works. The music, everything worked together very well, and it was a very touching moment. We have R2-D2 showing up as well. Again, I think that's more fan service. We didn't really need to see R2-D2. We weren't really wondering where he was, but of course he is Luke's companion, so they just had to throw that in there. Fair enough. I mean, maybe R2 helped Luke infiltrate the ship. If you go by all the various movies, we've seen R2 multiple times help to disengage the security systems in order for the other heroes to get on board the ship, so that was fair enough. And that is really the final scene where we see Luke departing with Baby Yoda and R2, and then we get the credits showing up. So another reveal at the end, again spoiler territory here. We do get an end credit scene where we see Boba Fett going back and really assuming his mantle, assuming his throne, and we get the further reveal that there will be an ongoing spin-off series titled The Book of Boba Fett coming in 2021. So they already had this planned in the past. Again, we go back to the huge announcements of the Star Wars franchise that were revealed in the Disney Investor Day, and it's been further revealed that a lot of those shows, particularly with that the Ahsoka one, won't get released till 2023, 2024 even, alongside as well the Rogue Squadron movie. So the fact that this Boba Fett show is coming 21 means it's been in the pipeline for a long time. To be honest, we've known this is going way back, because the initial plan of course was to have a Boba Fett movie. And the fact that we got The Mandalorian, many of us feel, including me, that The Mandalorian was basically the Boba Fett movie stripped down, and then it's changed over time. So it's no real surprise, I suppose, that the show is coming in 2021. So many developments and so many bombshells that we've got to talk about. But I think in overall the episode itself, I think it was very good. It was very solid. It ticked all the boxes that I want from a season finale. I've always mentioned the season finale of any show should be the most significant. It should be the most action-packed. It should be the one that has the most incidents, gives you the most to talk about in terms of the overall season, and giving you a lot to get anticipated and excited for the next season. And I think for the most part this season did that. The action and special effects were all top notch, as I mentioned already. It seems to be a much of a step up from the season 1, which was very good standard as well. There are certain issues, and again I think in terms of the storyline itself, it was again very basic, and I think there was a certain lack of intention despite the intensity of the action sequences, because as I mentioned before, Mando and his team, they just defeat Moff Gideon's team too easy. From a story and narrative point of view, it just felt a bit ordinary despite all of the action, and I think that's something that's a flaw of the entire series and not just this episode in particular. So I think overall as a finale, and I'm going to stay on this trajectory, it was a solid and good, thrilling, action-packed, exciting conclusion to the season. Now I do have to mention, and I'm sure everybody is, about the inclusion of Luke, and to be honest I've got very mixed feelings about it, and I will probably do a separate video because there's so much to talk about. There's so many different elements and layers we could take away from this, but ultimately my big concern is that where do we go for the future of Mandalorian season 3? Because if you think about it, by including Luke, you are essentially undercutting the value of the Mandalorian and its story, because I'm pretty sure the majority of the Star Wars fans were really now thinking about Luke and where has he been post the events of Return of the Jedi. Has he reconciled with Han? Has he reconciled with Leia? Has he been training more Jedi? Of course, we do know that eventually happens going on from the Disney Star Wars trilogy. Has he been training further? Did he meet up with Ahsoka? Was that the reason that he showed up rather than Ahsoka? Has he been working together with her? Has he sent her off on another mission? There are all these other questions, and the point is, if you think about it, certainly from my perspective at least, I'm probably now more invested in the story of Luke rather than The Mandalorian. And if we look at it, the fact that Luke has taken Baby Yoda, the story of Mandalorian could easily end. We could end Mandalorian after the second season and then do a new story where we concentrate more on Luke Skywalker and his further training of Baby Yoda, right? Because what is there more to Mandalorian as a character? Now that you disconnect him with Baby Yoda, what really is special about the Mandalorian from a character perspective? What is there in terms of his own story, his home purpose? He's fulfilled his obligation now. He's soared to the safety of Baby Yoda, so we could easily bring his story to a close here. And if we really think about it, are we as concerned about what happens with Bo-Katan, Ahsoka, Boba Fett, or are we more concerned with Luke and the story going forward? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of Star Wars fans are more invested in Luke's story. Could we potentially delve more into the expanded universe, which continues the adventures of Luke, Han and Leia? Is that a further spin-off series that we could see go in the future? Is it really just a massive fan service moment? The problem is you've dangled that big carrot in front of fans now. You can't just take it away after a single episode. Luke, as we all know, is probably alongside Vader the most iconic character within Star Wars. He is the identity of the whole Star Wars saga, so you can't just have him in these little one-off singular moments. He's too important to the story. So if we get to season 3 and we get some story where Luke essentially is too busy to look after Baby Yoda and we just hand him back to Mandalorian, again, it's just going to feel like a massive glorified fan service moment. And I think in some way it's disservicing Luke even more. Is that what you're defining him to now? We all know the fallout of how he was treated in the Disney Star Wars trilogy, but if you're going to bring Luke back in this capacity, it's got to be substantial. It can't just be a one-off fly-by moment. Oh, we surprised you all and now we're just going to go back to the adventures of Mandalorian and Baby Yoda in these standalone episodes. That's going to be a regression of the story and the narrative. And the one thing I've criticised about the Mandalorian is that it needs to expand more on the storytelling technique that it's been using. But you can't use Luke because Luke renders the Mandalorian useless. I'm probably now more invested to see a storyline where we see Luke training Baby Yoda and enhancing his force powers and abilities and seeing what else Luke can do in the future. I'm more invested in that now than what I am in the Mandalorian. So by trying to do this and trying to give fans supposedly what they want and give them a massive fan service, I think it's actually worked the other way. I actually think they've worked against the show, and it's going to be very difficult to walk back on this moment now because fans are going to be more invested in what happens to Luke as to what happens with the Mandalorian. So yeah, I'm not sure it was the best tactic to use right now. So I'm going to stop there because I'll probably talk about this in a separate video because there's so much more we can expand on this point. But in terms of the season finale, it was a very good, solid, action-packed, spectacular conclusion to what I think has been a very solid second season, maybe slightly superior to the first season. I will provide a season 2 review probably within the next week or so, when I will go over it in more detail as to what worked and what didn't work for this second season. But those are my thoughts overall on a very instant-packed and very bombshell dropping season finale of The Mandalorian Season 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm pretty sure you've got lots of thoughts and feelings and hope levels about what we saw within this episode. Did you think it worked? And what do you think about the future going ahead for the franchise and The Mandalorian itself Season 3? Are you more excited, less excited? Do you think we could essentially close out the story of this season and push on further ahead with further more significant characters within the Star Wars mythology? So that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.